Animals make great subjects, but they're not always easy to photograph, even in captivity. They often move quickly and unpredictably, and you can't tell them to pose for the camera. But zoos and wildlife parks are great places to hone your skills because they allow you to get up closer than you would in the wild. So we've come to the Cotswold Wildlife Park and Gardens to show you how to shoot animal pictures you can be proud of. The first thing you'll need is a telephoto lens. We're using a Nikon 18 to 200mm zoom, which will let us shoot at a wide range of distances without having to change lenses. But the Nikon 55 to 300mm or 70 to 300mm zooms would be a good choice too, especially for larger enclosures where the animals might be further away. Longer focal lengths do increase the risk of camera shake. As a quick guide, you can divide the lens's effective focal length into one to get the minimum safe shutter speed when you're shooting handheld. This is called the reciprocal rule. For example, with an effective focal length of 250mm, you should shoot at 1/250th of a second or faster. But won't the VR option on your lens help cut camera shake? Yes, but that's only part of the problem. VR can only stop camera movement, not subject movement, so you still need those faster shutter speeds when you're photographing animals. You might think that the easiest way to set shutter speeds would be in S or shutter priority mode, but actually the A or aperture priority mode is better. If we set the lens to its widest aperture, the camera will automatically choose the fastest shutter speed we could have used anyway. You will need a shutter speed of at least a 2/50th of a second, and a 500th of a second or a 1000th of a second if your subject is moving. On a dull day, you might need to increase the ISO setting, and in the conditions we've got today, an ISO of 200 will give us the fast shutter speeds we need. Next, we need the autofocus to keep up with our subjects. We're using single point autofocus so that we know where the camera is going to focus, and setting the focus mode to continuous, so that the camera will keep autofocusing as the subject moves. Now let's try shooting some pictures. Okay, the results aren't bad, but the background looks pretty horrible. One of the key things about telephoto lenses though is that you see only a small area of background behind your subject, and a small shift in position can place your subject against a much nicer background. Try crouching down too. If you shoot downwards from a standing position, animals can look small and insignificant, but when you get down to their level, they look larger and more in tune with their surroundings. Sometimes you have to shoot from behind wire fencing, which can make your pictures look ugly and amateurish. The trick here is to get as close as you can so that the lens is practically touching the mesh. This throws it completely out of focus, and if you can line up the lens with a small gap, the fence will disappear. Or sometimes you might have to shoot through a glass panel. The trick here to avoid getting unsightly glare and reflections is to get right up close so that the lens is actually touching the glass, and then shoot. Not all your subjects will be out of doors though. Zoos and wildlife parks often have indoor specimens too, where it's a lot warmer and you can get closer to the animals. But indoor lighting and glass cages bring their own problems. So let's go indoors and take a look. Now the first and most obvious thing about shooting indoors is that it's much darker. Fortunately, we don't need such high shutter speeds since we'll be closer to our subjects and using shorter zoom settings. Indoor subjects tend not to move so rapidly either, so this time let's aim for shutter speeds of a 30th of a second or faster. Again, we can adjust the ISO until we get the shutter speeds we need. But what about the artificial lighting? Don't we need to do something about the white balance? Yes, technically, we could choose one of the presets, such as incandescent or fluorescent, but it can be very difficult to accurately predict the colour of indoor lighting. So we're going to leave the white balance on auto and shoot RAW files instead. This saves all the colour data within the file, so that we can choose the best white balance setting on the computer later if we need to. Let's take some shots and check them to see if we need to make any adjustments. First, zoom in to check for sharpness. If your subject is blurred, you may need to increase the ISO to get faster shutter speeds, or pay more attention to where the camera is focusing. You can use the multi-selector to change the position of the focus point if your subject isn't in the center of the frame. And take a quick look at the histogram. Indoors, pictures can look brighter on the LCD than they actually are, so don't just go by their appearance. Finally, don't forget that most Nikon SLRs let you convert RAW files in camera. So when you're taking that well-earned break in a coffee shop afterwards, you can crop your RAW files and tinker with the white balance and exposure settings and create new JPEG versions to save you having to do it later.